All right, so welcome to our Strangers in Exiles show. My name's Darren, this is Trisha. We're known as Georgico, and if you're not familiar with our work, we create the work collaboratively. Trisha comes from a more children's book illustration background. I come from a painting background, more of a traditional painting background, and we combine those two artistic styles together to create the work that we have here. So we just wanted to kind of run through our show and share a little bit about the meaning and our thought process behind the work. So yeah, this is our Strangers in Exile show.
Yep. So just to start us off, I'm going to read our show description for some background. Throughout time, we, humanity, have been uprooted and displaced, whether by choice or by force. We wander the wastelands of generations past as strangers and exiles, looking for another home beyond the horizon. We scorn or lament the ruins of empires, yet fail to see the sins of our fathers reborn in us. As we journey to find a better country, we meet an uncrossable sea, the shore of the end of ourselves. The oppressor we run from is within us. Who then will save us from ourselves? What hope is there for the lost children of the guilty and damned? In Strangers and Exiles, artist duo Georgico's childlike characters venture on a perilous journey through wilderness and rubble. Their long and lonely exodus begins with fire and ends at the sea. Through 13 new oil paintings of both intimate and grandiose scale, Georgico continues to explore the themes of searching for home in humanity's third cycles. So just like our show description says, basically the theme of our show is a very universal one, we find. It's about searching for something permanent. It's about searching for safety and home when what we thought was safe and permanent we realize has failed us and we realize won't last. And so you'll see, we're gonna run through our paintings and you'll see that there's gonna be sort of a linear storyline of our characters losing their homes and then going on a journey to find something better.
Yeah. And I would say that this is probably one of our heavier themes shows that we've done. But we really are convinced that this is a really timely message for people right now, given the state of the world and all the different things that are going on. So we hope that as you journey with us, as we describe the work, that you will be able to find something to cling on to and also something to relate to as well. Yeah, so let's go through. So coming into the show, this is our first piece here. The title of this piece is called Displaced. It's an 8-inch by 10-inch oil on canvas framed. And I'll read the show, or not the show description, the painting description here for you. It says, "What once was safe, now lost to fire. Homes destroyed reveal the call to exodus to find rest elsewhere." So really we intend this to kind of be the start of the journey for this whole show. We have characters here that are watching a home and maybe even a community of homes being destroyed. And this to us is often the first step in someone's journey, the first step into moving out of what is comfortable. And so often we will never leave something that's comfortable unless it's taken from us. But nonetheless, it's still tragic. It's still something that's painful, that's very difficult to understand or to process. And in a sense, we see these characters onlooking the destruction of their community, which is a very difficult, heavy image, but very relatable. And one thing that you're going to see in a lot of this work, there is a lot of destruction, and a lot of it is physical. And that is relevant, obviously, today with all this stuff happening. But this is also something that can be read more symbolically, that people can go through these traumatic losses, and it could be something that's more internal. It could be something like the loss of a loved one, or it could be the loss of a dream or a hope or a desire. So this is the first piece, and then we kind of move on in the narrative here to our second piece, titled Flight. And it's a 9 by 12 oil on canvas. with a custom frame. And the description reads, attempting to escape what has been made by their own hands, these buildings will burn too. So we have these characters. Again, this is very Georgia Co-esque, childlike characters that are kind of winding their way through the maze of buildings. And as mentioned in the description, for us, these buildings too are going to burn. So these characters are on their way out, running away or escaping from the flammable things that they have built with their hands. Again, just kind of indicating an impending destruction that cannot be saved, but for them, they can get out. So that is flight. We're moving on to our next piece here. This is Over the Mountains, an 8 by 10 inch oil on canvas, custom frames. And the description reads, from the mountaintops, they can see the remains of home. When they look ahead, there's only endless wilderness. So you can see in the background, there's flames, there's the smoke. So for us, as we describe this, this piece in the painting, we are feeling like the characters have journeyed out of the kind of like town or where their homes are at, and now they're actually in the wilderness. But as they've reached this wilderness area, as they look ahead, all they see is more wilderness. And I think this is very relatable in seasons of transition where we don't know how far or how long these seasons will last. There's kind of like an open emptiness that can be hopeful in the sense that there's always a new thing on the horizon. But at the same time, I think when you're traumatically removed from what you love, it can feel like an endless journey of just nothingness. And I think that's where we find our characters here at this point of the journey. So moving on to this medium-sized work here. This is a 40 inch by 30 inch oil on canvas. Again, custom framed. So the description reads, 1 foot in front of the other, only seeing what is passing, not able to see what is to come, but there is no turning back. So we see a darker scene in this piece. It could be darkened by the time of day. This could be nighttime. It could also be darkened by smoke and fire. We obviously see reflective light, very warm reflective light coming onto the characters from the bottom of the piece up. So to us, this is indicating that it probably is coming from some sort of fire that these characters are passing by. And you see their hands are placed on each other's shoulders, and they're all looking in one direction. And for us, we feel like this is very similar to the journeys as well, when we encounter tragedy together. These characters are almost like sheep. They're following each other and needing each other, probably for support, for guidance, but they're not necessarily determining where they're going. They're kind of just following each other, hoping that they're going to end up somewhere, but snaking their way through the destruction and, in a sense, just witnessing what they're passing.
So for our next piece, this one's called Through the Valleys. It's 12 by 9 inches, oil on canvas, custom framed. And the description for this one is, winding their way through valleys carved by extinct waterways, praying that the ghosts of these rivers will lead them to living waters. And in this scene, you can see the characters all the way down here. And they are walking through ways that were once full of life but are now dry and dead. And they're hoping that it will lead them to somewhere good. But you can see that there's danger continuously around them. And something that we're going to continue to explore in this body of work is the idea of following in paths that were made before them and kind of repeating cycles and not being able to escape them. So we'll see that more in the next painting over here. This one's called Passing Through. It's 9 by 12 inches. And it says, passing by where others have been, seeing the evidence of generations past that have gone on this same journey before them, they were strangers here too. So in the same vein, these characters are following a path that has already been cut before them. And they may be hoping for a different, more successful, more hopeful outcome. But as they are journeying, they realize that they're just going through previous generations' ruins. And so there's this cyclical idea here that they're following in the paths, in the footsteps of people who have made mistakes before them, and they're bound to make the same mistakes as well. So for the next one, this one's called Flop. It's 12 by 9 inches. It says, the farther they get from the inferno, the closer they gather to warm themselves by yet another fire of their own making. And so we see here a group of characters that maybe didn't know one another before this destruction, but now they are joined together by this common experience. And they gather together for some sense of comfort. But you can see that it's a very small comfort in a very desolate, lonely place. And we are also kind of making the implications here that they are making a fire with their own hands to bring themselves comfort, but the fires that burned down their homes and their communities, that those were also made by their own hands. And there's kind of an inescapableness to whatever they put their hands to.
So now we're going to make our way across the gallery, and we're going to go to this next piece, which is titled Those Who Mourn. So this is one of our larger pieces. So this is a 96-inch by 72-inch oil on canvas custom frames. So I'll read the description again. It says, some linger to witness the flames, others turn away. Some leave by choice, others have no choice at all. Sister and brother linger in the light of destruction together. Soon they must step into the darkness with the other exiles. So this piece kind of ties back to the first piece we looked at, this in that this is kind of, again, almost the beginning of the journey. We have our characters looking at the destruction of something that they love. And if we remember the displaced piece, it was homes. But this time, this piece is looking back at the characters as opposed to the object of destruction. We're looking at the characters who are looking upon that object. You could tell that we were very purposeful in the choice to not include too many light sources. This one really is primarily coming from whatever they're looking at. And you can see the characters on the bottom left of the painting as well. They are turning away, kind of walking away from whatever is being looked at. These two characters, a sister and brother, again, very childlike characters. We see them looking upon this fire before them, and for us, we see it as the light kind of dying. Eventually, this fire is going to go out. Eventually, the light that is being offered to them from the fire destruction is also going to go out. And then at that point, the characters are going to have to leave with the other exiles in search for a new home, in search for warmth, in search for comfort. So this is a pretty major theme, as you can see throughout our work. Again, the show being quite heavy in theme as well. But we just also want to share that eventually, as we come around to other pieces, there's going to be glimmers of hope that you'll see throughout the work as well.
are kind of showing the beginnings of the journey. This one here is called By Day, and it's a 30 by 40 inch oil on canvas. And for this one, the description is, traveling by day, the sun made dim by smoke-filled air. The sweltering heat is made cool by the shade of falling ash. Wonder, shielded from the glare of the sun, continues her exodus. So some of you may know that this character, her name is Wonder, she's one of our main characters of our Georgie Hill universe. And we find that this piece is about contrast and juxtaposition, that normally the day might be difficult to travel in because of heat, because of the sweltering heat of the sun. But ironically, it's the burning ash that came from the destruction of her home that is making the heat of the day bearable. So it's interesting to us to think that sometimes, people say that every cloud has its silver lining. It's interesting to us that sometimes out of the most difficult, terrible circumstances, there is some good that can be found, that there is a grace that can be found in every circumstance. So even though the ash is evidence of destruction, it's also the thing that is causing her to be able to travel away from the destruction in hopes of finding a better place. So we're gonna move on to the next painting, which is a companion piece down here. And this one is called By Night. It's also 30 by 40 inches oil on canvas. For this one, it says, traveling by night, the chill of evening is heated by the fires of burning homes. Warmed by the distant flames behind her, Judith finds her escape by red moonlight. So Judith here is another one of our characters, and she has a mirror experience to Wonders. In this case, she's traveling by night, and although nighttime is normally too dark and too cold for travel, again, it's the fires of the burning of her home that is causing her to be able to find some comfort and some warmth, and to be able to make her escape. So again, it's kind of a play on that irony, but it's not just ironic, it's a grace that we can find glimmers of goodness and hopefulness in the most terrible of circumstances.
So now we're going to move on to another larger piece. This piece is titled On the Road Out. It's 72 by 72 inches, or 6 foot by 6 foot, oil on canvas frames. So I'll read the description here. It says, sheltering in the cleft of the rock, but for a moment. Bodies rest, but souls are restless when they think about who started the fires that destroyed their homes. So this painting, we see it as kind of a break, where the characters have been traveling for a while at this point, and now they're finally in the cleft of a rock, thinking upon what they've seen, what they've experienced, the journey, what they've lost. And we see this as kind of a moment where there might be some realizations. And as Trisha had mentioned before, about fire being started by their own hands, this idea and this thing kind of circles back where the question becomes, who started the fire, and was it even them who started the fires? Was it them who destroyed their own homes? And maybe it wasn't them in particular, but for us, we're kind of alluding to this idea that destruction is often sparked and started by someone or some person, and that they and we are all the same. That we might be at one point the person who is causing destruction or the person who is receiving destruction. So we see this piece as a contemplative piece where our characters are thinking upon, was it them who started the fire, or what position, I guess, in that circular narrative, what position are they in? Are they the ones who started the fire? Are they the ones who are suffering from having the fire and destruction brought to them? And that kind of leads us to this next piece that Trisha will talk about.
So this one's called Cube, and it's a 72 by 72 inch oil on canvas, 6 foot by 6 foot. And this is kind of they're on their way in the journey, and there's kind of a turning point here. And the description for this is lined up in orderly fashion, not knowing where they are going or what they're waiting for. The sun rises as the smoke clears. A cool breeze blows in from the sea. And so these characters here are just lined up, queued up. And it's more so like they're just waiting to see what's gonna happen. They can't see very far in front of them. All they can see is the person directly in front of them. So at this point, they might not even know, what am I even waiting for anymore? And maybe even, what did I just leave? They're just surrounded by different people and different experiences. And there's kind of a monotony there too, where it's just waiting and waiting for things to change. But yeah, maybe they don't even know what to hope for or what to look forward to.
So this kind of brings us to our last piece and final piece of the show. And this is our largest work. It's a 144 inch by 84 inch canvas, oil on canvas. That's 12 feet long and 7 feet high. And we kind of see this as the period at the end of the show, where all the characters have kind of finally come to the edge of the sea that cannot be crossed. And that in and of itself seems very hopeless and daunting and intimidating, but this to us is kind of a moment where our characters have to make a decision. So reading the description of this piece, it says, destruction behind them, an endless sea before them. They stand at the shore, at the ends of themselves, realizing that they have brought with them all that they want to escape. The flames of destruction will follow them. For they realize that the oppressor is within. They can leave their destructive selves, behind and cross the sea to a new home? Who can show them the way when all they have known is themselves? And I think this is really alluding to the story of humanity. When we look at history, we see nations and peoples constantly repeating the same sins, the same mistakes over and over and over again. And it kind of just gives us this impression of hopelessness that can we escape this cycle of history of constantly being the oppressor or being oppressed, and that cycle of even the oppressed becoming the oppressors eventually, and just that endlessly going. So that's symbolically represented through, at this point, you see a lot of characters carrying flags. You see characters that look like soldiers, maybe some of them even carrying weapons. And they're all bunched up on the sea, kind of traversing back and forth across the shore, trying to figure out a place to cross. And for us, we see these characters in the front, again, Wonder being here in the center, Judith, Brother, Jade. These are reoccurring characters within our universe. And I think for them, they're kind of realizing that even if they were to cross the sea, even if they were to find a way to get to this better land, if they were to do it just on their own accord, they would bring everything that is within them to this new land, and this destruction would just follow them. So at this point, though hopeless, this is a moment where our characters have an opportunity to kind of look beyond themselves And I think this is the main question that we have for a lot of you, the viewers, and then our fans and people who come to the show. Although this is a very heavy themed show, we like people to ask this question: where do we put our hope in? What do we put our faith in? What hope is there for us if we are damned to just repeat this cycle of destruction? So at this point, I mean, I guess we can share personally what we feel. Patricia and I think this is something that we see within human history, and that's why we created this body of work, especially in this time and season. Just with all things happening in the world, globally, all the instability, all the things happening at home that we see. We're asking this question too, and this is a question that I think for us has caused us to no longer look upon ourselves, even to look upon human history for answers, but to start to look outside of ourselves. And this really begs the question of faith. Where does faith lie within the human experience? And in my mind, this is where it comes to play. So for us as Christians, we believe that the only way to cross the sea is not something that we can glean for ourselves, but it's actually something that God has brought to us. That in His love and in His knowledge of seeing the turmoil that humanity goes through, that He had a response for that. And that response was through His Son, Jesus Christ. That He came and that He took the payment for all the destruction that we experience in this life. So we don't have to just continue this cycle. There's actually an opportunity to forgive. There's an opportunity for peace to be found in one, and that person being Jesus, who would absorb all that suffering, all that sin, all that destruction. And for us, that's the question that these characters are asking. Is there someone who can save us, who can take the weight of destruction upon themselves and create a path for people to cross into this new land? I don't know if you want to share, Patricia.
Yeah, we just, as we've been talking about, there's just a cycle throughout humanity, and there's just this idea of who can break the cycle when they're trapped within it. When the destruction is already in ourselves, how can we escape ourselves? And so, yeah, as Darren was saying, it's all about, for us, receiving from outside the cycle, someone who can completely break the cycle of destruction and of guilt and of sin, ultimately, that's so deep within us. So yeah, that's where we find our hope. And yeah, it's just a question that I think everyone, maybe not everyone will go through the same experience, and the themes that we've talked about, it might be as small as, I lost my toy, and that could be a child's whole world. We have 2 little ones. That can be their entire world, and it can create such pain in them. And then we can go all the way to the most difficult things that humanity has experienced. But it's just a completely universal, we think, experience, whether in the most small ways or in the grandest, most terrible ways. And so we feel like there's hope for everybody, regardless of the measure of their experience. And we also hope that these themes will just be encouraging and hopeful to people, even in a way to connect with one another, and that empathy is something that we have tried to explore a lot in our previous works as well. It's like we're kind of all in the same boat. We all have experienced these similar emotions and experiences and difficulties.
So that kind of leads us to this final piece in this show, which is this installation that Trish and I built. It's meant to be a miniature house, but also it's a doll house. If you look on the back side, it's bisected. So again, alluding very similarly to what Tricia had said, that no matter what our experience is, whether we're a child and we lost our toy, our dollhouse, or we're an adult and we've actually lost our physical home with everything that we love in it, this is a part of the story of humanity. So this piece is called Dollhouse. It's mixed media made out of plywood and balsa wood. We painted it with house paint and spray paint. And Trisha's gonna read the description here.
All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them.
So this description actually comes from a passage of scripture. It's from Hebrews 11:13 through 16. And it speaks about people who have lived by faith. And I think that this sometimes comes as a misconception that to live by faith means that you live ignorant of all the bad things that happen in the world. But
Or even that by living by faith, you'll get whatever you want.
exactly, yeah, that you'll be able to escape the flames of all the things that happen. But it's more so that these people who live by faith are putting their hope in something that is not touchable by human hands. And in that sense, is beyond the experience of things in this life. Because as we know, even in the most ideal circumstances, our bodies will decay and will ultimately be lost. And this is something that we cannot escape as just a human species. And the cycle of loss and life and death will continue to happen. So we have this house here, this dollhouse here, as a kind of a physical representation of that, and then tying that in with the portion of scripture that that the people of faith, you know, they died as well, and they didn't receive the things that were promised to them. But these are people who are holding on to the hope that a better city, a heavenly city, is being prepared for them. So this kind of concludes the description, the walkthrough of our show. And if you're able to, it is going to be open till Saturday, this Saturday, the 17th. And I think that's the last day that it'll be viewable, and then it'll come down. So if you're in LA, please come stop by to see the work in person. If you're not already following us, you can follow us on Instagram at georgico.la. And then if you have inquiries about the piece and the work for purchase, you can contact Andrew at Thinkspace. You can find him on the website, thinkspaceprojects.com, or you can just email them directly and they'll handle any sales requests that you might have. Anything else? Do you have any questions, Andrew? No? Okay.